How's it going, everyone? I hope you're all having a fantastic day. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Sony A7S III, and I'm going to be going over a full review of the camera. So this is going to be a long-term review after the hype of the camera, and hopefully this video will give you a good idea if this is the camera for you or it's not. So first off, let's start about talking the A7S III's build quality. Now, I really like the ergonomics. This camera is built really well and feels really premium. I was using a Canon 80D before this, and I didn't feel that the camera was bulky or was too big. It just felt good in my hands, and I was a bit doubtful about switching to a Sony mirrorless camera because it's smaller, and I had some doubts about the grip and all of that, and I admit I was wrong. The A7S III's grip is really fantastic. I have medium hands, I would say. It's not too small or not too big, but I would say that the grip fits perfectly, and now that I've been using the A7S III, if I go back to the Canon 80D, that camera just feels chunky and really big for no reason. I prefer this grip a lot. The A7S III features a great flip out screen, which I'm using right now to see myself. And it's really great for vlogging, and it's really handy. A lot of Sony users were wanting this implemented in Sony cameras. And another thing that has been improved is the dial. Now you have the photo and video dial right next to each other, not on separate planets, because let's face it, these are the dials that you're going to be switching from the most. The shutter just sounds amazing. I didn't expect the shutter to sound this good, as this is a video-centric camera, but just listen to this. Now moving on to the new Sony improved menu system. So this new menu is a lot better than the old Sony menu. Everything is organized into tabs and folders and then subfolders. And you can also set up a custom menu tab for your most used settings. Regardless, the menu is laid out very well, and with a few weeks of use, you'll develop muscle memory and everything is just where expected to be. Alright, now we're going to talk about the thing that you want to see the most, which is image quality. This is a video first camera after all, and how does it perform in terms of video? The image quality of the A7S III is simply put gorgeous. The performance of a camera in this class is pretty much unbeatable, featuring 4K up to 120 frames per second, 1080p up to 240 frames per second, 10-bit 422 colors, S-Log 3, dual native ISO, and the ability to record in H.265 encoding. The 4K video is stellar, it is super sharp, yet keeping that cinematic film look to it. If exposed in color correctly, you can easily get an image close to what you would get from an Alexa. Color science has been improved a lot, although in some certain scenarios I would still see some green shifting, green tint around the skin. It is not as bad as it used to be in old Sony cameras, and it's just something that you can fix in post. The 4K 60 is pretty much non-distinguishable from the 4K 20. You can record almost indefinitely given that you have enough storage. As for the 120 frames per second, it does have a rather slight 1.1 crop, which I don't really mind, because it's very small, you barely notice it, and the 4K 120fps slow motion is just insane. It is buttery smooth, and it looks really great too. It doesn't feel like you're losing any quality when switching to 60 or even 120. 1080p 240 frames per second is really great for slow motion. You get 10 times slower video, although I would rather use the 4K 120 as it is sharper, but when needed for the extra slow motion, it's nice to have. Overheating seems like an old debate now, it's 2020, but we gotta touch on that. I've used this camera in every situation possible. I've used it indoors, outdoors, in sunny days, you name it. I don't think I've ever got an overheating warning, let alone the camera overheat. I did feel it once get warm inside behind the screen when I was using 4K 120 and a lot of slow motion and b-roll clips, but even then the camera didn't even give me an overheating warning and it just kept on going. There's a setting in the menu where you can switch the auto turn off temperature from standard to high. This will make it so the camera will endure more heat before shutting off, or the warning sign comes on. Still won't matter because the A7S III pretty much solved the overheating issue entirely. Before we move on though, I want to talk about the significantly improved rolling shutter. Thanks to the 12 megapixel sensor, the camera has to process less megapixels, thus better rolling shutter. And in my opinion, this is as close as it gets to a global shutter in a camera of this class. Now moving on to the A7S III's hyped up areas, which is the low light. Now while I don't deny the capabilities of this camera in low light, I want to clear up some misconceptions about how it performs and the ISO range. The normal ISO range starts from 100 to 102,400, and the expandable ISO goes as low as 40 ISO and as high as 409,600. So this camera is superb in low light, it performs really well, but at the same time it's not magic. What I mean by this is that you can't shoot Netflix documentaries when shooting at 80,000 ISO or when you're in pitch black conditions. Nevertheless, if used correctly, this camera can produce really great results at maybe 25,600 ISOs and even higher sometimes, thanks to the dual native ISO and S-Log 3, which starts at the base 640 and another native ISO at 12,800. So when you switch to 12,800, that's when the second native ISO kicks in, and you can definitely see that the noise is really clean comparing it to a 10,000 ISO. For me personally, I think that the maximum usable ISO in this camera is 40,000, given the circumstances of course, but if you're in extreme conditions, this camera can literally see in the dark and it sees better than your eyes, and you can just expand that ISO all the way up to 409,600. Is it me, or every chapter just seems hyped and controversial for this camera? Okay, moving on to photography. This is a very controversial part for the Sony A7S III, as it takes really great pictures, but it has a 12 megapixel sensor. First of all, taking pictures on this camera is a blast. The shutter sounds amazing, the UI is great. I just love taking pictures on this camera. It feels great in the hand, feels great to hold, and that EVF, holy moly, 9.44 million pixels, best in class electronic viewfinder. Now moving on to the controversial part, the 12 megapixel sensor. I truly believe that you can use this camera on the go or for social media or web photography, but if you're a professional photographer, you'd probably not even be looking to buy this camera. Now for me personally, I don't feel like this is an issue. I can shoot any picture that I want, YouTube thumbnails, Instagram posts, anything for the web. Just keep in mind that when shooting with this camera, because of the 12 megapixels, you can't really crop in that much, as you will lose some quality. Overall, this camera can take really nice photos, but it's just not made for professional work. Now what about the file sizes and how do they edit in post? So when it comes to video codecs, you do get a lot of options to choose from, starting with XAVC-HS, which is the H.265 encoding, XAVC-S 4K or HD, which is in the log GOP format, and SI 4K and HD, which is the all intro format. The general rule here is the larger the file size, the easier it is to edit, as it is uncompressed, and the smaller the file size, the harder it is to edit on your computer. So yeah, gotta ask yourself, which is more important to you, editing speed or space? All intro formats are a lot easier to edit in post because they're uncompressed. Thus, they're pretty much 3 times larger than the size of the long GOP or GOP format. And the long GOP format, which is a lot smaller, is a lot harder on your computer to edit. Now, there is a workaround around this. There is an in-camera proxy setting where you can record in XAVC 4K, and you can record proxies for that clip in the same time, which means you don't have to make proxies in post. All you have to do is attach them. All you gotta do is go to the proxy settings in the camera and turn them on. Now to do this, you need the V90 card if you're shooting the long GOP format with proxies. If you're shooting all intra, you can't record proxies with that unless you have a CF Express card. I made a separate video about proxy settings. If you want to watch it and get further detail, if I remember, I'll put something up here, otherwise it's in the description. Okay, so let's just sum up the pros and the cons of this camera, starting of course with the pros. The astonishing video quality, 4K 120 FPS, 1.1 slight crop, but the slow motion is just buttery smooth. 1080p 240, gotta give him credit for that. Extremely capable in low light thanks to the dual native ISO. Best in class EVF with 9.44 million pixels. Feels great in the hand and easy to use. I love the grip, and the new menu system is just no recording limits, and it does not overheat. I'm looking at you, Canon R5. What's the point of a camera that you can't reliably use in a shooting day? Now let's move on to the cons. I'm gonna use my quotation hands right here. Only 12 megapixel, which is not suitable for professional work. I wouldn't really consider this a con, but I just had to throw it in there. The LCD screen could be better. I'm recording with it right now, as I said earlier. It's not bad. I can see clearly, but given that the EVF is that much better in terms of pixels and resolution, I would have loved to see something a bit higher. And this is just me nitpicking here, but there's no DCI footage at 4.2K unless you externally record on something like the Atomos Ninja 5. Would have been really nice and cinematic to have the in-camera, but you can't really have everything. I'm not gonna complain, the image quality is amazing. Alright, so to conclude this video, who is this camera for and is it worth buying? This camera is for video first creators who want photography on the side. This is as simple and as short of an answer as it can get. It can produce really great image quality, it is really great in low light, great ergonomics, love the build quality, and I think that this camera is future proof as well. This is truly the near perfect camera. Okay, so thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, subscribe, hit that like button down below, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.